Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Friday, and all of our guests today are brought to you by our DTMZ sponsor, the Whistler Golf Club.
Oh,
Opening up in May.
Delaney's
OK Tire and Langley inbox just before we get to Thomas Drance from The Athletic. Unsigned, Mikheyev tore his ACL. You should not say anything about him without mentioning this. Takes 2 years to come back, if at all. We didn't mention that in the first segment.
Well, we didn't, but...
Well, there's a lot there because people were wondering about the treatment he received from the Canucks or lack thereof, right?
Well, he had
they didn't
operation.
Get around to it
yeah.
until deep into the season last year.
I don't think they put him back in the lineup, Don, unless he's 100%. I mean, I don't know how you could put him back in if he wasn't 100%.
Thomas Drance joins us now from The Athletic, and he's still in Seattle.
Yeah.
In the wake of the Kraken's 5-2 win over the Canucks, 4 straight losses for Vancouver. Thomas, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you? How's the Emerald City?
Beautiful. We've had great weather here since arriving. And honestly, I mean, Climate Pledge is a great place to cover a game. Canucks were dreadful, but other than that, it's been a lovely time.
Was that as bad as the Canucks have been this season, Thomas?
I was talking to some Canucks fans at the hotel actually last night on my way back, and I was saying I think the Mount Rushmore of disappointing Canucks performances this season includes both Philly games and the loss in San Jose, right? And then that one would sort of complete the quartet. Yeah, they were miserable last night. I mean, there were patches of the game that I didn't totally loathe. I thought the Kraken had more zone time in the first, but the Canucks were playing more direct. They were still sort of getting the balance of chances. I liked the Garland fight in the second period. I just thought, if you're trying to fire up your team, fighting a guy 5 inches taller than you is always going to earn my respect. And then things really went sideways on them in the second period. And really little details. Like, how many times have we seen an opposing team score off of an offensive zone draw against this team? I mean, they've been really good off of sets. To lose a guy, in the low slot like that, I mean, that's very uncharacteristic of this team. And they had no pushback in a game they were trailing. Like, this was by far their worst offensive performance, right? If you look at what they generated, the expected goals haul, the way the power play looked, I mean, Philip Grubauer, they caught a break. They got Seattle's second goalie in, and they just didn't test him. Like, there was, they needed breaks to win, or they needed breaks to score, and they got 2 of them. Like, they were gifted 2 goals off preposterous bounces, and it didn't matter. It wasn't even close. That's tough. But, coming into this game, I really did think we were going to see a tired Canucks team. 10 games in 17 days across 8, 8 of them road games with 3 cross-continental flights, plus the fact that a quarter of the team went to the All-Star break. Like, this team looked fried last night. And so, I sort of view it as a test more than a crisis, which is sort of the title of my column today over at The Athletic, and just think, look, like, I don't think that performance was representative of what it's looked like for the Canucks on this losing streak. I don't think it's representative of what we'll see going forward from this team. This team's a lot better than that. I think it's going to be like the other 3, tough losses, tough performances we've seen this season. We haven't seen many of them, so it's easy to pick them out individually, where, this team's going to bounce back from that level of play. Whether or not they bounce back and win against Boston on Saturday, well, that's a tough spot. But I don't think we're going to see that level of ineptitude from this team again.
The answer here might be 12 of the next 15 games at home. But Thomas, what gets them out of this? You touched on some things there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's going to get them out of it fundamentally is their 5-on-5 game, right? I mean, 5-on-5, like, even across this 4-game losing streak, they've only been outscored by 1 goal, 5-on-5. If you go back 10 games since the All-Star break, and the 10 games, like, this is the thing. It's not a 4-game losing streak. It's 10 games since the All-Star break. This team has been below 500 now in terms of their results, right? I mean, we're talking about a team that's been, that's picked up fewer than 10 points anyway. I think it's 9 points in 10 games. So they've fallen below 500 for a more protracted stretch than just like a 4-game blip, right? And yet when you look at that, they've outscored their opponents by 5-on-5 in that stretch, and that's without their goaltending being up to its usual standard. So, that's the mark of success. You need to fix their special teams. Like, their special teams need to get better enough that they can at least hold the fort. 10 shorthanded goals against in 10 games. I know a lot of it came against the Wild, and that was a force of nature game. But it doesn't change the fact that you can't win like that. 3 goals, 4 on the power play in 10 games with 3 goals against, 3 shorthanded goals against. Can't win like that, right? If you're not generating any positive goal differential for yourself on the power play and you're getting stomped on the PK, you're gonna drop games in this league. It's a special teams league. So what's going to get them out of it is that they are genuinely improved 5-on-5, and that form is held even as things have begun to go against them a bit. But in order to get out of this, they need their special teams to at least be okay. And of late, they've been cataclysmic. They've cost this team.
Thomas, a lot of heat on Pettersson these days. A lot of people want to see more from him. There's rumors that, he could end up getting 10, 11, 12 million. Just your thoughts on his play in the last couple of weeks.
I mean, I think he's been fine. Like, I don't think there's anything to worry about in terms of his performance. I think you can tell, though, that the relationship is getting more complicated between this fan base and the player. I think the way that the contract situation is played out, and by which I mean the lack of movement there, I think has people less willing to cut him slack. That's honestly what's the fundamental dynamic going on. I don't really think it's that Pettersson is struggling in any material way. I don't know that he's been like at his most imperious best, but he hasn't been a liability defensively. Like, a lot of his game, a lot of the things that have been good about his game to this point in the season, with the exception of the power play, which, is a bigger problem than him, right? I think is still there. I still think he's this team's best two-way driver 5-on-5, with the exception of Connor Garland. I think he's performing fine. Like, I don't think he's a problem. I don't think he's, line item 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 about why this team is losing games. And I think if fans are suggesting that he is, they might be stealing themselves, right? Like doing that sort of self-defense thing because of the fact that he hasn't committed long-term yet. Those conversations still seem to be in the same stasis they've been since the boat, right? Where he wants to wait. And so, I really look at it and think it's, I think the conversation around Pettersson right now reflects Canucks fans' insecurities more than it reflects his performance. Let's put it that way.
All right, there was one positive this week, Thomas. Despite all the losing, Arshdeep Bains. What did you think
awesome.
What did you think of his debut? And then last night he gets moved up to the second line.
Yeah, and so I actually thought he played well last night too. The Canucks had one line that was kind of going 5-on-5, and it was the Miller line. And like even late in the game, there was a sequence cutting off the top. I forget who the left side defenseman was. But the way that Bains cut off the top, the way that he defended the point, sort of denied a shot, took away space slowly, left the defender with no other option but to send a weak pass down the boards, which one of his teammates was able to, cause a 50-50 battle. Canucks are in the clear. That's what he's done well. Like, it's the stops and starts. It's the way that he's chipped his opponents. It's the intensity that he's shown. And I was 0% surprised to see him get elevated up the lineup, to be frank, after his debut, because the things that Bains has done well through his first 2 NHL games are the things that tend to get you more opportunities, right? He's like busted his rump to be in position. He's shown really high end, like really impressive for an NHL debutant, defensive awareness, strong defensive reads. He feels like he has a natural understanding, or at least an instantaneous understanding of how to play Rick Tocchet hockey. And if he can keep doing that, that's going to earn him opportunities. I'd add this. The Canucks' bottom 6 group, I mean, it's been a strength of this team all season, but, between Ilya Mikheyev struggling and getting bumped down the lineup, and that drafts Niels Höglander further up, and, Pius Suter was this team's 4th-line center, and he's been in the top 6 for most of the last 10 games and was on the 3rd-line wing yesterday. I mean, between that, like when you look at the bottom 6 lines that Vancouver started the game with last night, right? they didn't manage a shot on goal. You know, like the way that those lines were initially composed, those two different trios, not a single shot on goal, 6 against for the Kraken in those minutes. I mean, given what's happened to the bottom end of Vancouver's lineup, like there's opportunity to, whether Bain sticks in the top 6 or not, you know, they need a spark in the bottom 6. And right now he's given them something of one, even if it hasn't necessarily translated into the team winning games again. I've been really impressed by the details in his game, and I think he's going to keep getting looks, provided that he can maintain that level of intensity, which is always the big question with any player who comes up from Abbotsford, right? If your calling card, if Baines' calling card right now is that intensity, that level of detail-oriented play, well, you know, can he maintain that in game 7, 8, 9 when the adrenaline wears off? That to me is the question, because I do think he's going to get a run here based off of the way that he's played so far.
I thought the best part of the game was Rick Tocchet post-game. He had a lot to say. He didn't say a lot, but he said a lot, if you know what I mean. Thomas,
No
thanks
question.
for this.
Gentlemen, anytime. Cheers.
You bet. Thomas Drance still in Seattle.
Yep.
Kraken over the Canucks by a score of 5-2.